Today I'm going to tell you a story about what might be one of the greatest upsets in the history of esports. When an amateur ragtag League of Legends team was able to beat arguably one of the most talented teams in Korea, but what made this victory special was these guys didn't just win, they won with, I think, the weirdest off-meta strategy we've ever seen succeed on the competitive stage. Because this was such a momentous occasion, I will do my best to explain this for League and non-League fans alike, but before we jump into it all, I have to give a quick shout out to our sponsor. This video is brought to you by Surfshark VPN. Ever since I had a ton of my stuff hacked a few years ago, I learned the hard way how important internet security is online, and when it comes to protecting yourself, using a VPN like Surfshark is one of the best tools at your disposal. Browsing with a VPN encrypts all the data you send through the internet from various unwanted spying entities. Surfshark in particular also has a really cool tool called Surfshark Alert that can let you know if anyone already has your personal information on the dark web. Not only are VPNs important for safety, but they're also really fun. You can use them to browse region-locked content from other countries on sites like Netflix or Hulu. I personally do this to unlock various German sites as I've been continuing my German language learning journey, which has been made so much easier with this. Surfshark specifically is probably the best VPN you can use, since a single subscription with them allows you to have their tools on an unlimited number of your devices. On top of all of that, if you use the link in the description down below along with code GBay99 to sign up, you will get 83% off your order plus 3 months free, the best deal that they offer. It's totally worth checking out. I highly recommend it. Yes, it does help the channel if you do so, but it's also a legitimately great service. So thanks again to Surfshark for sponsoring this video and supporting our content. Okay, so let's set the stage. This story took place at the start of the new year in early 2013. South Korea had just concluded their first professional year of competition in the then new esport League of Legends. One of their teams had made it all the way to the grand finals of Worlds that year and inspired many new players to pick up the game and try and go pro themselves. The top level of competition they all aspired to reach was the OGN Champions Series, what would eventually become the LCK today. One of the ways to make it to OGN was through an event called the NLB tournament. This was a series that pitted some of the top professionals against amateur squads who could enter through various online qualifiers. The first place victor here got automatic seeding into the following OGN Champions season, whereas other top finishers would get seeded into qualifiers with a second chance to make it to the show, and this tournament is where our story takes place. One of the teams who entered the NLB Winter 2013 bracket was CJ Entus, a relatively new team in League who just made some big signings, picking up 2 players who would later go on to be future legends of the game. Dade was their mid laner, who would go on to be one of the most talented mids of early seasons, period. He won multiple Korean titles and had loads of success in the most competitive league in the world, albeit struggling some internationally. In addition to Dade, CJ also managed to sign Insec, a player that you may have heard of, as he was so innovative he would later get a move in-game named after him, the Lee Sin Insec combo. CJ were one of the top teams favored to win this NLB tournament, not just because of their new roster, but because they were also sponsored and backed by the CJ Group, a multinational conglomerate who had tons of money to throw around. Well, the 2013 Winter NLB event looked like it was about to be theirs for the taking, as they went nearly undefeated throughout the bracket on their way to grand finals, sweeping some very good teams in the process, like Zenix Storm and MVP Blue on their way. It was no surprise when they showed up in grand finals, but who they were facing was a shock to everyone. GSG was an amateur team in every sense of the word. Of their 5 starters, 2 of their players had never played in any competitive events before this, while the other 3 had played in the most recent OGN League for another team, although they looked pretty bad there, getting a tied last place. Here though, they were hoping that this little team could somehow qualify for the Champions League again and possibly restart their pro careers, although the road to do so would be incredibly tough. Once placed in bracket, they would have to face 2 legendary organizations in Korea. Firstly, Incredible Miracle, a well-known org from the days of StarCraft, now ready to move into League of Legends. Then Najin Shield, a team that would go on to regularly place top 4 in Korean events and even make quarterfinals at a world championship. And yet, GSG somehow managed to beat both of these teams, incredible miracle, in dominating fashion and Najin in a tight 3-2 upset series. Somehow, they put together a Cinderella story that now found themselves in grand finals up against the tournament favorites. These players probably knew just how big of an opportunity this was for them as they played their tails off early on in the series, somehow managing to pick up 2 wins against the dominant CJ Entus. This was still CJ Entus though, and naturally they would pick up 2 games themselves, sending this series into a sudden death Game 5. For an amateur squad like GSG, this was their time to pull out all the stops. A win here meant they could start professional league careers, giving themselves a bright future, while a loss in this single match could potentially throw all of that away. Whether they win or lose here could very well decide the careers and life paths of these young players. So what do?
Okay, so for anyone who doesn't know,
my goodness.
oh, it's Heimerdinger!
GSG picked Heimerdinger and was about to take him jungle, but played by their support player and with full AD runes?
What runes is he running? Which physical damage runes? What's going on?
It's important to remember, back then in 2013, Heimerdinger was busted as a champion, and not in a good way. The character was so fundamentally broken, he hadn't been seen in competition at this point for 2 to 3 years. He was still so bad that he was about to get 2 different reworks updating the character over the course of the next 2 years, and even today remains more so as a weird off-meta pick than a serious champion. His big issue at the time was he was a character focused around the idea of placing these turrets that would attack enemies that came nearby, but back then his turrets had really bad AI when it came to who they would focus. They were also really easy to kill and didn't deal all that much damage in the first place. They just kinda sucked, and this in turn made other Heimerdinger abilities suck, like his ultimate, which was just a buff for those turrets. He had tons of different problems, which is why he was never played and eventually given a pretty hefty rework, but Heimerdinger has always been good at one thing: pushing lanes. And that's exactly why GSG picked him. At the start of the match, 4 of GSG's players invaded into CJ's jungle and stole red buff with a blitzcrank hook over the wall. This was pretty standard stuff at the time for any team with blitzcrank, but what wasn't standard was what happened next.
Just for chat, this is not manufactured. Pastry time is super fun.
I love Heimerdinger. I absolutely love Heimerdinger.
And they're not laning.
ARAM!
4 of GSG's players were running down mid lane, pushing immediately, while the other remaining player jungled with Ghost and Teleport. This sounds insane. Any LoL veteran will tell you that sending almost your entire team down mid lane immediately is a bad idea. Reason being, all the enemy has to do in this situation is survive, and they'll eventually outscale you. Having solo players on the top and bottom of the map collecting minion experience and solo gold from the outer lanes will let them get a huge lead in the mid to late game, whereas the 4 players mid lane have to share all the experience and gold from the 6 minions who come down each wave. But it turns out, for CJ Entus, surviving that push was easier said than done.
The synergy there with the Magic 10 passive.
3 minutes 33 turret.
Was that
They're still going.
At the 3-minute and 33-second mark, GSG took the first tower of the game, even while CJ sent 3 of their own players down mid to try and defend the lane. The reason GSG was able to do this was because of the composition that CJ selected. There was this really ingenious pick ban phase that I could make an entire separate video breaking down, but to summarize how it went, GSG were essentially able to trick CJ into picking these champions that Heimerdinger and his squad were perfect against. CJ Entus only had 3 characters that they could send to defend mid lane: Cho'Gath, Sona, and Kha'Zix, which none of these champions are particularly well equipped to stop the pushing force of GSG. To effectively halt their assault, they would have to clear all the minions that GSG are pushing with, but 2 of these champions are melee characters that are super susceptible to getting locked down and killed if they stand too far forward, while the other is a squishy support who will die instantly if she's ever caught out. GSG, on the other hand, have both long-range siege options that they can use to take down towers with characters like Heimerdinger and Caitlyn, while also having tons of pick potential and crowd control in their other characters Twisted Fate and Blitzcrank, who can be used to catch out and kill any of CJ's players who miss position. There wasn't really anything else CJ Entus could do here. If they sent any other champions mid lane, they would be losing out on the solo minion experience and gold from the outskirts of the map. Even if they did commit to sending another person though, and tried to match GSG's composition, well, they aren't really built for that same sort of all mid lane strategy and would just be a weaker version of their opponent's team. All CJ could do here was to sit back and try their hardest to keep their towers standing.
You could then reset yourself and go back to laning without a crazy level disadvantage.
They're gonna get this turret. It's gone. It's gone. There's nothing CJ Entus can do about that tier 2 turret in mid.
At 6 minutes and 40 seconds, the second turret fell. Right before this tower crumbled, one of the two casters, Papa Smithy, suggested that maybe GSG was trying to take these first two towers and then go back to laning normally. This would give them a big vision advantage over the map, making it easier for them to shut down CJ's jungler and gank mid lane, but that's not what their strategy is.
And Dade, there's just nothing he can do. There it goes, 9 minutes 33. And Dade's probably dead here, leaps over the wall.
At just 9 minutes and 33 seconds, GSG took down the mid lane inhibitor, exposing CJ's base in what had to be the fastest inhibitor in competitive League of Legends history. Because CJ was so ill-equipped to deal with this push with their 3 defenders, really the only hope they had was if their outer lane carries scaled up for late game, maybe pushing to take some towers themselves, but that's where Olaf comes in. See, GSG didn't just push down mid lane with all 5 of their players. Their jungler, Olaf, played somewhat normally throughout the game up until this point, running around taking jungle farm from both jungles, but also running top lane and bot lane anytime one of the outer lanes had minion waves crashing into his towers. This is why he was playing the game without smite, so he could take teleport instead and use that to get around the map much faster. The one issue that GSG was starting to face at this point after taking their first inhibitor was they were slightly under-leveled. Most of their team was around levels 4 to 5, whereas all of CJ Entus was level 6 or so, but hilariously enough, Olaf was actually out-leveling CJ, hitting level 8 around this time and completely making up the difference. At this point in the game, there wasn't anything left to take mid lane, so GSG then turned their attention to bot and just kept on pushing.
This is commitment. This is, oh man, TS got his ultimate insect, caught in the wrong place, wrong time. Gonna get stunned up here, but GSG not quite enough with the damage. Hook! So close.
I should probably mention at this point that GSG weren't just winning this game because they had devised this super superior strategy and composition. This was not something that was a guaranteed victory from Champion Select onward. This strategy required immaculate execution, since any death could immediately give CJ Entus an edge and swing the game back in their favor. CJ Entus's players were always just one teamfight away from picking up a few kills, closing the gold difference, and allowing themselves to reset the lanes, but GSG never gave them an inch. If CJ ever wanted to teamfight, GSG was always there ready and waiting. At one point, they knew some 15 seconds ahead of time that Shen on CJ Entus was about to use his ultimate to teleport into the rest of his team, trying to give them a man advantage and start a teamfight that could potentially swing the game back in their favor, but Olaf left his lane preemptively, reading what Shen was about to do, allowing him to show up at the fight the exact same time CJ's top laner did. Incredibly smart, forward-thinking predictions like this were necessary for every single fight or GSG could lose, but they never slipped up.
There's a heal? Oh man, Space gets hooked in there as well. Mandy with the kill. Long Panda in trouble. Exhausted up. Easy there with the stun. Blitzcrank goes down, but they get the turret. And still the kill there for Clear. Stand United.
At the 12th minute mark, they would take all 3 towers bot lane, exposing that inhibitor as well, which was now ripe for the taking. Before they made a final push there, though, the team's players would recall back to base to heal up and try and buy some items, although this is where GSG ran into another problem, in that they were really poor. Their team was ahead in gold, but that was mostly from Olaf free farming and from all the towers that GSG was able to take. The 4 pushing members they had had who were all under-leveled were also under-farmed compared to their CJ counterparts. When it came to any sort of itemization, they would likely be behind for the remainder of the game, so what were they supposed to build? Well, how about all Doran's items? Heimerdinger, 4 Doran's rings. TF, 2. Caitlyn, 2 Doran's blades. How about Blitzcrank stacking 3 Doran's blades? If you're unfamiliar with League of Legends, these items are starter items that you're supposed to just buy 1 of. They don't build into anything like every other item in-game. If you just stack Doran's items, you'll start getting outscaled by an opponent the instant they start finishing real items. But if you're absolutely positive that you can win a game before your opponent even has time to finish a core item, I guess you could build all Dorans.
Solo though is in here. Shen is walking back, but GSG there, easy, picks up Insect. Blitzcrank goes down as well, but the double up for Twist of Fate and the inhibitor's already gone down. They rotate towards mid, 2 inhibitors in 15 minutes.
Well, GSG knew they could do exactly that, taking bot inhibitor, going back to take mid after it respawned, and then heading up to top lane to repeat the process for a 3rd time. There were no options left for CJ Entus now. All they could do was sit back and watch their turrets die, which is obviously a pretty bad strategy in League of Legends, so it's probably not all that surprising that at 19 minutes, the 3rd and final inhibitor would fall, where then, of course, GSG would push down to take the Nexus, and with the help of all their super minions, win the game.
Are they really gonna do this?
Yes.
Insect coming back in with the home guard boots, easy. Chonji goes down there to Dade, but Solo's destroying turrets. GSG, they don't even care, the super creeps, they're onto the Nexus, they might win before I see the Engines can surrender, and GSG, they've done it! And they'll be winter champions with Jungle Heimerdinger.
I've made a couple of other videos on off-meta strategies from League's history on this channel, and in most of these stories there isn't much to say after this. Players who are famous for off-meta picks eventually get figured out, and they can't ever translate their talent to longer careers, but oddly enough, that's not what happened here. GSG went back to their amateur status at first. In the following OGN season that they just qualified for, they would finish in last place in their group and would eventually split up shortly afterward. But after that, some of these players went on to have pretty incredible careers. The team's mid laner, who was playing TF in that legendary game, his name was Easy, although he would later go on to rename himself to Easy Hoon, and after he left GSG, he eventually found himself on SK Telecom, going on to win 2 LCK titles as well as a world championship as a mid lane substitute backing up Faker, but that Heimerdinger player would do even more. Mondu later went on to rename himself to Pumondu and eventually went on to be the starting support for SK Telecom T1. SKT would then go on to win the OGN Summer Championship, Korean Regional Finals, and Season 3 Worlds that very same year. This dude started off playing Heimerdinger at the beginning of the year and ended it as a world champion. League of Legends makes no sense.